Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. My name was Gus, and I was what you'd call a success. At 32, I had a corner office with a panoramic view of the city, a 7-figure portfolio, and an apartment so minimalist and clean it felt more like a gallery than a home. I wore tailored suits that cost more than most people's rent, and my life ran on a schedule that was precise down to the minute. I was driven, I was respected, and I was profoundly, bone-achingly lonely. The only real color in my monochrome life was Adele. Adele was my polar opposite, a 27-year-old graphic designer. She lived in a state of beautiful, organized chaos. Her apartment was a jungle of potted plants, half-finished canvases, and books stacked in precarious towers. She wore vintage dresses, laughed with her whole body, and believed in things like serendipity and fate. We were an odd pair, the stoic businessman and the free-spirited artist. But we'd been best friends since college, the anchors in each other's wildly different worlds. The night it all changed started, as many bad decisions do, with too much wine. We were celebrating a new client she'd landed. One bottle became two, and soon we were wandering tipsily through the old part of town, the cobblestone streets slick with a light rain. That's when we saw it, a small, dusty antique shop, its windows crammed with forgotten treasures. A sign on the door read, "Open late for dreamers and drifters." "That's us," Adele slurred with a giggle, pulling me inside. The shop smelled of old paper and wood polish. We drifted through narrow aisles, pointing at tarnished silver and faded portraits. In a dark corner, tucked away on a shelf, was a book. It wasn't large, but it felt heavy. It was bound in dark, cracked leather with no title, just a strange, swirling symbol embossed on the cover. "Look at this," I murmured, my usual pragmatism softened by the wine. I ran a hand over the cover. It felt warm to the touch. Adele leaned over my shoulder, her long brown hair brushing against my cheek. We opened it together. The pages were brittle. The ink faded. It was filled with a language neither of us recognized, except for a few lines of English scrawled on the final page, almost as an afterthought. Adele squinted, tracing the words with her finger. "Change the body," she read aloud, her voice a theatrical whisper. "See the soul." Below it was a short, strange-sounding incantation. I laughed. It was absurd. Something out of a fantasy novel. The perfect, ridiculous end to a perfect, drunken night. "Go on," I nudged her. "Read it. Let's see if you turn into a frog." She rolled her eyes but grinned, a spark of mischief in them. "Only if you read it with me." And so we did, standing in that dusty little shop. We stumbled through the nonsensical words together, our voices mingling in the quiet space. We finished, looked at each other, and burst out laughing. We paid the bemused old shopkeeper a few dollars for his prop and left, the book forgotten in a bag as we said our goodbyes and went back to our separate, predictable lives. I wish I could say I felt a tingle of magic, a shift in the air, but I felt nothing. I fell into my king-size bed, alone in my silent apartment, and passed out. The next morning, I woke to confusion. The first thing I registered was the light. It was softer than the harsh, direct sun that usually sliced through my blinds. The second was the fabric against my skin, not my usual crisp, high thread count cotton sheets, but something impossibly smooth and cool. Silk, pink silk. My eyes snapped open. This wasn't my room. The walls were a soft lavender, not my sterile gray. Art prints and fairy lights were strung up where my stock market tracker should be. A wave of panic rose in my throat. Had I brought someone home? I never did that. My hand went to my head, expecting to feel my short, meticulously styled hair, but instead, my fingers tangled in a long, soft curtain of hair. It cascaded over my shoulders, fine and brown. What the hell? I bolted upright, and that's when I felt it. A new weight on my chest, not heavy but present, soft. I looked down, and my heart stopped. Breasts. They weren't large, but they were undeniably there, rising and falling with my panicked breaths under a thin silk chemise. I scrambled out of bed, my legs feeling strangely weak and uncoordinated. I stumbled towards a full-length mirror leaning against the wall, my reflection coming into focus. The man in the mirror was gone. In his place was a slender young woman with wide, terrified brown eyes, a heart-shaped face pale with shock, and a tangled mess of brown hair. Her body was willowy, with gentle curves at the hips and chest. She was completely, horrifyingly familiar. It was Adele. I was looking at Adele, but the eyes staring back were mine. A scream tore from my lips, but it wasn't my voice. It was high-pitched, melodic, and laced with pure terror. Adele, I whispered, and the name sounded foreign in this new mouth. No, this can't be real. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I lurched for it, my fingers fumbling with the touchscreen. The caller ID was a picture of my face, my real face. Gus, I answered, my hand trembling. It was a video call. My own handsome, rugged face appeared on the screen, but my eyes were wide with the same horror I felt. And then Adele's voice, now a deep baritone, came roaring out of my phone's speaker. Gus, what the hell is happening? Why do I have your everything? I just stared, holding the phone, looking at myself, speaking with my best friend's voice. While I was trapped in her body, speaking with hers, the sheer impossible insanity of it washed over me. The dusty old book, the drunken incantation. Change the body, see the soul. For a moment, there was just stunned silence as we stared at each other through the screen. Two souls trapped in the wrong shells. Then, a hysterical sound bubbled up from my chest. It started as a sob but twisted into a laugh. On the screen, my old face mirrored the action. A deep, booming laugh that sounded completely wrong. We were laughing, crying and laughing at the same time. Because what else was there to do? The book, I finally choked out, my new voice trembling. It had to be the book. You think he shouted back. I woke up and nearly had a heart attack, Gus. We have to fix this. We spent the next hour in a state of frantic disbelief, trying to piece it all together. Adele, in my body, found the book. She read the last page again. There was another line, in even fainter ink that we had missed in our drunken haze. As the moon waxes and wanes, so too does this fleeting form. When a full cycle ends, the souls shall return to their home. A full lunar cycle, roughly a month. So we're stuck like this, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the phone, at Adele's face, at my face for a month. A strange calm settled between us, the calm that follows a Category 5 hurricane. Panicking wouldn't help. We were both pragmatic in our own ways. The problem was identified. The time frame was set. Now, we had to find a solution for the interim. Okay, Adele said, her voice in my body already sounding more commanding, more Gus-like. Okay, we can't just disappear for a month. You have my job, I have yours. We have to live as each other. The idea was terrifying. Me, Gus, the man who lived by spreadsheets and logic, had to become Adele, the free-spirited artist, and she had to become me. We can do this, she said, though it sounded like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. We just have to stay calm. We'll talk every day. We'll guide each other 1 month, and then everything goes back to normal. I agreed. I had to. But as I hung up the phone and looked back in the mirror, at the stranger wearing my consciousness, a chilling thought settled deep in my bones. What if normal was gone forever? The first 24 hours were a masterclass in humiliation and sensory overload. Living in Adele's body wasn't just about looking different, it was about feeling everything differently. My first challenge was the shower. Back in my apartment, my morning shower was a 5-minute affair, hot water, unscented soap. Done, here, in Adele's small, tiled bathroom. It was a journey into a new world. I turned the knob and the warm water that cascaded over my new skin was a shock. My old body was sturdy, weathered. This skin was sensitive. I could feel every drop, the warmth spreading through me in a way that was both unnerving and vaguely pleasant. I reached for the soap and was confronted with a dizzying array of bottles, pomegranate and hibiscus body wash, coconut milk shampoo, lavender conditioner, I grabbed the body wash, and the sweet, fruity scent was overwhelming. It clung to the steam. To my skin, I felt like I was marinating in a fruit salad. As I washed, my hands moved over unfamiliar curves, the gentle swell of my hips, the softness of my stomach, the strange and alien landscape of my chest. I averted my eyes, a hot blush creeping up my neck. It felt profoundly invasive, like I was trespassing in the most private way imaginable. I washed quickly, my movements clumsy, desperate to feel normal again, whatever that now meant. Getting dressed was even worse. My entire wardrobe, my armor of bespoke suits and starched shirts, was across town. Adele had laid out some clothes for me before she as me left for my apartment. On her bed was a pile of what looked like brightly colored scraps of fabric, and underneath them, the real nightmare began. My phone rang. It was Adele. "Okay, Gus," her new deep voice boomed. "First things first, underwear." "I'm not having this conversation with you," I squeaked, my voice cracking with stress. "You have to look on the bed. See the lacy blue thing? That's a panty. Put it on." I held up the piece of delicate blue lace. It felt like it was made of spider webs. It was absurdly small. "This can't be right," I muttered, fumbling to step into it. The fabric was soft but offered zero support. It was just there. I felt ridiculously exposed. "Next, the bra," she continued, oblivious to my mortification. The bra was a contraption of straps, lace, and underwire that seemed to defy all logic. It was a soft pink color with delicate embroidery. After 10 minutes of twisting, turning, and nearly dislocating my shoulder, I called her back in a rage. "How does this cursed thing work?" I could hear her sigh on the other end. "Okay, put it on forward. The cup's over your, then reach behind you and hook it." Reaching behind me was a new kind of yoga I wasn't prepared for. My fingers fumbled with the tiny hooks and eyes. It took another 5 agonizing minutes before I heard a satisfying click. The underwire dug into my ribs, and the straps felt tight on my shoulders. It felt like a cage. "It's on," I grumbled. "Good, now the dress. It's a simple sundress, and then the sandals." The dress was a flowy, floral print fabric that slipped over my head easily, but as it settled around me, a new wave of vulnerability washed over me. My arms were bare, my neck was bare, and my legs were completely exposed from the knee down. I'd never felt so unprotected. The slightest breeze from the open window made the fabric flutter against my thighs, a constant, rustling reminder of my new anatomy. "It's tight," I said into the phone, adjusting the way the fabric clung to my chest, and yet somehow light. I could almost hear the smirk in her voice. "Welcome to womanhood, Gus. Now I have to figure out how to tie one of your ridiculous ties. Call me if you burn down the office." She hung up, leaving me alone with my new reflection. A woman in a summer dress stared back at me. She looked pretty. The thought was so foreign it startled me. I'd judged women on their appearance my entire adult life. A detached, objective assessment, but to see beauty in a reflection that was somehow me was deeply unsettling. The final trial was the shoes. They weren't high heels. Thankfully, just a pair of sandals with a slight wedge. But walking in them was different. I had to take smaller, more deliberate steps. My whole center of gravity had shifted. I finally managed to leave the apartment, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The city I had commanded was now a gauntlet of new experiences. The way other people looked at me had changed. Men's eyes lingered a moment too long. Women gave me quick, evaluative once-overs. I felt like I was on display, every movement scrutinized. A construction worker whistled as I walked by, and I flinched, a jolt of anger and fear mixing in my gut. I had always been the one in control, the one who was looked at with deference, not with appetite. When I arrived at Adele's design studio, a bright open-plan office that smelled of coffee and creativity, her colleagues greeted me warmly. "Adele Morning, I love that dress on you," said a woman named Sarah, her smile genuine. "You look amazing today. Really radiant," another one added. I just smiled weakly, my throat tight. I couldn't manage more than a squeaked. "Thanks." My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt like a spy, an imposter who would be discovered at any moment. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, trying to make sense of Adele's project files, nodding along in meetings, and praying no one would ask me a question I couldn't answer. By the time I got back to her apartment that evening, I was emotionally and physically exhausted. I peeled off the dress, unhooked the torturous bra with a sigh of relief, and collapsed onto the bed in just the lace panties and a camisole. I had survived one day, only 30 more to go. Lying there in the twilight, I ran a hand over my new, softer stomach. This body was a foreign country I was being forced to inhabit. It was sensitive, vulnerable, and subject to 1,000 rules and sensations I had never known. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something beyond just fear and frustration. It was a tiny, terrifying spark of curiosity. What else didn't I know? The first week was a blur of adaptation. The second week, I started to learn. It began with the small things. I learned that you couldn't just stride through a room, you had to navigate it. I learned to sit with my knees together. A learned reflex I didn't understand until I absent-mindedly sat like a man on the subway and got a series of disapproving glares. I learned that my new voice was more persuasive when it was softer, and that a well-timed smile could diffuse tension in a way my old, booming commands never could. I was learning to perform femininity, and it was the most demanding role of my life. Adele, on her end, was struggling with the opposite. She called me one night, her deep voice full of frustration. Everyone just agrees with me. She said, I present a half-baked idea in your morning meeting, and the board nods like I've just delivered a sermon from the Mount. They're not listening to the idea. They're listening to this body, this voice. It's intoxicating. Gus, and it's kind of gross. I knew what she meant. Just from the other side, people didn't take my Adele's ideas as seriously at first. I had to work twice as hard to prove a point, using charm and meticulous preparation where my old self would have just used blunt force. The world treated Adele with a gentle condescension that infuriated the Gus still inside me, but I was slowly learning how to use the tools this new form gave me. I learned to use hand gestures to emphasize a point, to make eye contact in a way that was engaging rather than intimidating, to laugh at a bad joke to build camaraderie. One night, after a particularly grueling day, Adele's work friends, Sarah and Jess, insisted on taking me out for drinks. You've been so quiet lately, Adele, Sarah said, looping her arm through mine. You need a night out. I wanted to say no. The idea of navigating a crowded bar in this body was my new personal hell, but refusing would be suspicious. So I found myself in a low-lit, noisy bar, clutching a glass of white wine and trying to look like I belonged. I was wearing a simple black dress, a concession after I vetoed the sequin top Jess suggested, and a pair of low heels. I had even managed to apply a little mascara and lip gloss with the help of an online tutorial, and the effect was surprisingly nice. I felt a strange flicker of confidence as I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. I looked like a woman on a night out with her friends, a normal woman. That's when he approached. Excuse me, I don't mean to bother you, but my friend and I are having a debate. Is that a pin from the old Apollo Theater on your jacket? I looked down at the jacket Adele had left for me. Pinned to the lapel was a small enamel pin I hadn't even noticed. Oh, I guess so. He smiled, a warm, easy smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. He was tall, with dark hair and a kind face. He wasn't conventionally handsome in the way models are, but he had an undeniable charm. I knew it. My friend owes me $10. I'm Michael. By the way. Adele, I said, the name feeling a little less like a costume than it had a week ago. My voice was steadier than I expected. His friends were waving him over, but he ignored them. So, Adele, are you a fan of classic cinema, or do you just have excellent taste in forgotten memorabilia? Normally, I would have shut this down. I had no time for small talk, for the dance of flirtation, but something about his genuine curiosity disarmed me. And maybe, just maybe, a small part of me was tired of being Gus, the impenetrable fortress. We started talking. I told him about the graphic design projects I was working on, channeling everything Adele had ever told me about her passion. He was an architect, and he spoke about buildings with the same reverence Adele spoke about fonts and color palettes. He didn't just look at me, he listened. He asked thoughtful questions. For the first time in 2 weeks, I wasn't just playing Adele, I felt like I was just a person, having a conversation. At one point, I laughed at something he said, a genuine, unforced laugh. It came out light and airy, and it felt as surprising to me as it did to him. He looked at me, his expression soft. "You have the kind of smile that makes time slow down," he said, his voice low over the music. My breath caught in my throat, my heart, which I was so used to being a steady, reliable metronome, started to beat a wild, syncopated rhythm. A hot blush flooded my cheeks, and I looked down at my drink, suddenly shy. This was different from the leering glances of strangers. This was intimate. It was a direct line to a part of me I didn't know existed, a part that could be flustered, that could be moved. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without a second thought. I went home that night in a daze. I stood in front of Adele's mirror, the one that had been my tormentor, and really looked at myself. I saw the blush still lingering on my cheeks. I saw the way her eyes were sparkling. I touched my lips, the phantom tingle of his compliment still there. This is insane, I told myself. You're Gus. This is just the body's reaction. It's hormones. It's not real. But the argument felt thin, because for the first time since the swap, I wasn't just feeling angry or afraid. I was feeling something else, something warm and confusing and terrifyingly alive. It was a feeling I had read about, seen in movies, but never truly experienced for myself. It was a flutter, and it was mine. The halfway point came and went. The moon in the night sky was a perfect, gleaming circle before it began its slow retreat. Michael and I had been texting. He was funny, smart, and refreshingly direct. He asked me out for coffee, and I accepted, my fingers trembling as I typed the word yes. The coffee date was wonderful. It was terrifying and wonderful. We sat for 2 hours, talking about everything and nothing. He didn't seem to notice my occasional stumbles, my moments of awkward silence where the Gus in my head was screaming at the Adele on my lips. He just saw a woman who was, as he put it, a little shy but with a fascinating mind. That phrase stuck with me. Fascinating mind. No one had ever described me that way. Powerful, yes. Ruthless, certainly, but fascinating. As the date for our return to normalcy drew closer, I agreed to meet Adele or Gus. As the world now knew him for lunch, we chose a quiet cafe midway between our two apartments, our two lives. Seeing him was a jolt. He walked into the cafe wearing one of my best suits, but he wore it differently. He moved with a confidence that was less rigid than mine, more fluid. He'd let my hair grow out a little, and it softened my usually severe features. He looked happy, healthier. I, in turn, had learned to move with a grace that had once felt so alien. I walked in wearing a pair of jeans that fit perfectly, a simple knit sweater, and flat ankle boots. I felt comfortable. I felt like myself, this new self. We sat across from each other, a man and a woman who held the other's deepest secret. "You're glowing," I said, and the observation was clinical, but the feeling behind it was not. He truly was. Adele smiled, and it was her smile on my face. It was profoundly strange. "So are you," she replied, her voice my old, familiar bass. "You walk like you were born in that body now." We ordered food, the small talk feeling inadequate for the enormity of our situation. Finally, she leaned forward, her expression serious. "We need to talk about the swap back, Gus." My stomach tightened. "I know, it's next week." "Are you ready?" she asked, and there was a strange hesitation in her voice. I thought about it. Was I ready to go back to my cold apartment, my high-stress job, my empty life, back to being a person who saw emotions as a liability? I thought about the easy camaraderie at Adele's office. I thought about the simple pleasure of feeling the sun on my bare arms. I thought about Michael's warm smile and the way my heart leaped when my phone buzzed with a message from him. "I don't know," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. Adele let out a long breath, a sound of relief. "Thank God, me neither." She told me about her experience, about the startling power and privilege that came with being a tall, successful man. Doors opened for her. People listened. She had single-handedly restructured my company's entire investment strategy. using her creative, out-of-the-box thinking to solve problems my rigid logic never could. The company was thriving, but more than that, she felt seen, respected for her mind in a way she never had been before. I loved the feeling of being strong. Gus, she admitted, of being heard without having to fight for it. I feel free. And I, in turn, confessed about Michael. I met someone, I mumbled, feeling a blush creep up my neck. And it's complicated. I really like him, Adele, but he doesn't know who I am. He thinks I'm you. Does he like you the real you? Inside, she asked, her gaze intense. I think so, I said, my voice filled with a hope that felt as new and fragile as my body. But what happens when we switch back? Do I, Gus? Call him up and say, "Hi, we had coffee last week, only I was in my friend's body." He'll think I'm insane. I'll lose him, and I don't think I want to lose him. The truth of that statement hit me with the force of a physical blow. I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to lose this, the warmth, the connection, the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of being vulnerable. We sat in silence for a long time, the unspoken question hanging in the air between us. That night, I went home and stood in front of the mirror for what felt like the 100th time. But this time, I wasn't assessing or judging, I was just looking. I was wearing one of Adele's simple cotton nightgowns. I saw the gentle curve of my shoulder, the line of my collarbone. I raised a hand and traced the shape of my face. My fingers brushed against my lips. Michael had told me he loved my smile. Did that compliment belong to me, or to the body I was wearing? Who am I? The question wasn't about Gus anymore. It was deeper. Was I the sum of my memories and ambitions, or was I the person I was becoming? A person who was softer, more empathetic. A person who could feel joy in small things. A person who could fall in love. I realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, that I had been happier in the past 3 weeks than I had been in the last 10 years. My success had been a shield, protecting me from a world I was too scared to truly engage with. I'd built a fortress and called it a life. Adele had found strength and freedom in my body, and I had found emotion and connection in hers. We had, through this bizarre cosmic joke, stumbled into the lives we were secretly yearning for. The full moon was in 3 days. We had a choice to make. Could we really undo this? More importantly, did we want to? The night of the full moon arrived, cloaked in a nervous silence. The moon itself was magnificent, a perfect silver disk hanging in the inky sky, its light pouring through the window of Adele's apartment. It felt ancient and powerful, a silent witness to our impossible predicament. We had decided to meet at my place. It seemed fitting to face our decision in the space where this new life had begun for me. Adele arrived, looking imposing and uncomfortable in one of my formal suits. It was clear she felt as out of place as I did. The antique book sat on the small coffee table between us, its leather cover seeming to absorb the light in the room. It looked heavier now, weighted with the gravity of our choice. The spell to reverse the change was right there. On the last page, all we had to do was read it. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the city outside and the frantic beating of my own heart. I kept smoothing the fabric of my skirt over my knees, a nervous habit I'd picked up. Finally, Adele broke the silence, her borrowed voice a low rumble. "So this is it." I nodded, unable to form words. My gaze was fixed on the book. One short incantation and Gus would be back. I would be trapped in my old life, haunted by the memory of soft skin, genuine laughter, and Michael's gentle eyes. The thought was unbearable. "I can't do it, Gus," Adele said, her voice cracking with an emotion that was all hers. "I can't go back." Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. "I don't want to either." She looked at me, my eyes searching my face. "Are you sure this is forever? No more suits, no more corner office. You'd be giving up everything you built." "It was just a building," I said, the words coming out with surprising ease. "It was empty. This life feels full. It's scary and confusing, and I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. But it's full. I feel things. I didn't know I was numb until I started to feel again." I told her about my second date with Michael, how we walked through the park and he held my hand. I described the simple jolt of electricity I felt, a feeling so potent it had made me gasp. How could I go back to a world without that? She in turn told me about her triumphs at my company, how she'd used her artistic sensibilities to broker a deal with a difficult European client, not through aggression, but through finding a common ground in art and culture. She was good at it. She was respected. We both found what we were missing, Adele said, a slow, wondrous smile spreading across my old face. You needed a heart, I needed a voice. It was that simple, and that profound. We had been two halves of a whole, and this absurd magic had put us where we were always meant to be. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit city. Then, let's live like this, I said, my voice soft but certain. I turned to face her, a real, genuine smile, my smile. On this face blooming, I'm Adele now, and you're Gus. She stood up, and for the first time, she didn't seem like an imposter in my body. She seemed to own it. She walked over to me, and the person who was once my best friend, my complete opposite, pulled me into a hug. It was strange, being held by my own arms, feeling the familiar strength of my old body, but it was a comfort. To Adele, she said, her voice thick with emotion. To Gus, I whispered back into the fabric of my old shirt. We didn't read the spell. We didn't even open the book again. We left it on the table, a closed chapter. Instead, we opened a bottle of wine, a cheap, sweet red that my old self would have sneered at, and we toasted to our new beginnings. We spent hours planning the logistics, the legal hurdles of officially becoming each other. It would be complicated, but it wasn't impossible. That night, for the first time, I went to sleep not as Gus trapped in Adele's body, but simply as Adele. And for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. The war inside me was over. I had chosen a new life, and I was ready to live it. Living as Adele permanently was different from just playing a part for a month. It meant fully letting go of Gus. It meant committing. The first step, and the most terrifying, was Michael. Our relationship had deepened over the past few weeks. We were on the cusp of something real, and I couldn't build that future on the most colossal lie imaginable. He deserved to know who he was falling for. I invited him over for dinner a week after the night of the full moon. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely chop vegetables. I rehearsed the words in my head 1,000 times, and every version sounded more insane than the last. Hi, Michael. I'm glad you came. By the way, I'm actually a 32-year-old man named Gus, and my soul swapped bodies with my best friend. More pasta. He arrived, smiling that easy smile of his, and my courage almost deserted me. He looked so happy, so normal. I was about to shatter his reality. We made it through dinner with strained small talk. Finally, over coffee, I took a deep breath. Michael, there's something I have to tell you. It's going to sound completely impossible, and you have every right to walk out of here and never speak to me again. But I need to be honest with you. He put his cup down, his expression turning serious. He just listened, his eyes never leaving my face as I told him everything. I started with Gus, the lonely businessman. I told him about Adele, my free-spirited friend. I told him about the antique shop, the drunken dare, the impossible morning I woke up in this body. My voice wavered, and at one point tears streamed down my face, not of sadness, but of sheer, terrifying vulnerability. I laid my soul bare. When I finished, the silence in the room was absolute. He stared at me, his face unreadable. He didn't look angry or scared. He just looked thoughtful. He was quiet for so long that I started to panic. I'd done it. I'd broken whatever was growing between us. So, let me get this straight, he said finally, his voice calm. The person I've been getting to know, the mind I find so fascinating, the personality I'm falling for, that's you, Gus. Yes, I whispered, my voice hoarse, but I'm Adele now. He was quiet for another minute, his gaze distant. I could see him replaying all of our conversations, our moments together, viewing them through this new, impossible lens. Then he reached across the table and took my hand, his fingers wrapped around mine, warm and strong. I was wondering. he said softly. There were moments where I felt this incredible strength in you, a kind of certainty that seemed at odds with your shyness. And then other times, this profound sensitivity you tried to hide. I thought you were just complex. He shook his head, a small, amazed smile on his face. It all makes sense now. He squeezed my hand. I'm not going to pretend this isn't the craziest thing I've ever heard. My logical, architect brain is short-circuiting. But my heart, he looked me straight in the eye, and all the confusion in his expression melted away, leaving only sincerity. My heart doesn't care about the details. I fell in love with you, the person I talked to for hours, the one who laughs at my terrible jokes, the soul. The book was right. A sob of pure, unadulterated relief escaped me. He stood up, came around the table, and pulled me out of my chair and into his arms. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling safe for the first time since my world had turned upside down. So, Adele, he murmured into my hair, it's nice to finally meet you. From that moment on, things began to fall into place. With Michael by my side and the new Gus as my staunchest ally, we started to build our new lives. We used my business acumen to turn Adele's small design studio into a thriving agency. I found that I was a natural leader, but my approach was different now, more collaborative, more empathetic. I wasn't just chasing profit, I was helping to create something beautiful. The legal side was a tangled mess of feigned amnesia and forged documents, a process that the new Gus handled with a surprising flair for drama. To the world, Gus had a life-altering epiphany, sold his shares, and moved away to live a simpler life, while Adele inherited a mysterious fortune that allowed her to expand her business. It was a flimsy story, but people rarely question good fortune. A year after my confession, Michael and I got married in a small ceremony in a city hall. My only family there was Gus, who stood as my man of honor, a strange and perfect circle of friendship. He looked happy in my old life, and I was deliriously happy in his. We weren't pretending anymore. This was real. I was Adele. I wore dresses because I loved the way they felt. I learned to cook, finding a meditative peace in the process. I filled my home with plants and art, just as the original Adele had. But I also kept my sharp business mind, my love for a good spreadsheet. I wasn't Gus, and I wasn't the old Adele. I was someone new, forged in the space between. Life settled into a rhythm that was both comfortable and constantly surprising. About a year after our wedding, something shifted. I was tired all the time, and certain smells sent me running for the bathroom. Michael joked about it at first, but then a small, impossible thought began to take root in my mind. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I hid it in my purse, feeling like a teenager. The idea was absurd. Me, Gus, pregnant. But I wasn't Gus anymore. This body was capable of things my old one could never imagine. Sitting on the edge of the bathtub, I waited for the result. The 3 longest minutes of my life, and then I saw it. 2 pink lines. Positive. I just sat there, staring at the little plastic stick, a maelstrom of emotions swirling inside me. Fear, shock, and then a wave of pure, unadulterated wonder that was so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. This body, this vessel I had fought against and then learned to love, was creating life, a life that would be a part of me and a part of Michael. It was the ultimate, irrefutable proof that my transformation was complete. The first person I called, after telling a stunned and ecstatic Michael, was Gus. "You're not going to believe this," I said, my voice trembling. When I told him, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard a sound I never thought I'd hear from my own old vocal cords, a sob of pure joy. "We're going to be an aunt," Adele cried, and we both burst into laughter through our tears. Our bond had transcended friendship. We were family now, bound by a secret that had given us both the lives we were meant to lead. The pregnancy was a journey of profound discovery. I felt the first flutter of movement inside me like a tiny, secret message. I watched in awe as my belly grew, a physical manifestation of the love Michael and I shared. It was strange and it was magical. Every kick, every hiccup, was a reminder that I was part of a miracle I had never thought possible. This was a depth of feeling, a connection to the fundamental cycles of life that my old self could never have comprehended. 9 months later, after a long and exhausting labor, I held my daughter in my arms. She was tiny, perfect, with a tuft of dark hair like Michael's and a determined look in her eyes that was all too familiar. As I looked down at her small, perfect face, my entire world clicked into focus. The pain, the fear, the confusion of the past few years, it all faded away, replaced by a love so fierce and all-consuming it felt like it could power the sun. This was why. This was the point of it all, to lead me here, to this moment, to this tiny human who was a part of me. Later that night, in the quiet of the hospital room, I stood by the window rocking my daughter, Lily, in my arms. The city lights twinkle below, the same lights I used to look down on from my cold, sterile office. I felt like a different person then because I was a different person. I caught my reflection in the dark glass. I saw a woman, her hair messy from a long day, her face etched with exhaustion and a deep, radiant joy. I saw a mother. I saw Adele. I saw me. I used to think I lost myself that night, I whispered, my voice a soft murmur in the quiet room, my breath fogging the glass. I kissed the top of Lily's head, her newborn scent filling my senses. But maybe that was when I finally found me.